And thank you very much for joining us at this hour. Like I said, we will be covering the final leg of the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's tour of the United States, and day 3 of Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's state visit to the United States is underway. An official State Department lunch, discussion with leading American CEOs and a diaspora outreach are on the cards. The Prime Minister took part in a high-tech handshake event at the White House. The Indian Prime Minister held meetings with entrepreneurs, CEOs and representatives from various companies. U.S. President Joe Biden and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi met senior officials and CEOs of American and Indian companies. They discussed innovation and investment in a variety of technology sectors, including AI, semiconductors and space. The Prime Minister said the coming together of technology and talent is definitely a guarantee for a bright future.
Direction to the world, which is going to...
Our countries are taking innovation and cooperation to a new level in our relationship. And thanks in large part to the folks around this table. So my message today is really simple. We've got to keep it up, and we have to make sure we aim even higher. We're going to see more technological change. You've heard me say this a number of times in the next 10 years. Than we saw in the last 50 years.
Now, following the meetings, U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris and Secretary of State Antony Blinken hosted a state lunch for the Prime Minister. The lunch includes officials from the State Department as well. Ahead of the lunch, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, Vice President Kamala Harris and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi addressed the guests. The Indian Prime Minister raised a toast to friendship, peace and the prosperity of citizens in India and the United States. The Prime Minister praised Blinken, saying the U.S. Secretary of State had played a crucial role in strengthening ties between both nations. After the state lunch, the Indian Prime Minister will engage with influential figures and leaders from civil society at the Kennedy Center. This will also include prominent corporate honchos and personalities. The Prime Minister's final engagement will be interacting with members of the Indian diaspora and Indo-US community, including community leaders. This is expected to take place at the Ronald Reagan Center in Washington, D.C. Well, let's talk more about the final leg of the Prime Minister's visit to the United States. And joining me now is Rich Artzen. He's a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council in Turkey and also a geopolitical analyst, and Jessica Stone, who is our correspondent at the White House. Jessica and Rich, thank you very much for joining us at this hour. Jessica, I will begin with you. According to the U.S. President, he says that talent technology guarantees a brighter future. Probably you can tell us more about the meeting between the Indian Prime Minister, the U.S. President and the CEOs.
Yeah, you know, this is certainly a market that so many of American CEOs have been looking to expand in, and there have been a lot of hurdles, particularly moving high-tech manufacturing to India, whether it's government red tape, government permissions, permits, all of those kinds of things have been a constant discussion amongst American tech manufacturers. But they have a real need now, right, because of what we've seen with the supply chain issues surrounding China, to wean themselves off, to de-risk from Chinese manufacturing and to move towards other prominent areas of manufacturing. And India is a great partner in the sense that it has a ready bunch of engineers to do the work to help with the design, and it has a lot of know-how and a lot of educational partnerships with the United States. So a lot of the conversation with these CEOs, and we saw many of them here at the state dinner, AMD, Micron, which of course has just agreed to invest in a semiconductor packaging plant in India. We saw Google, we saw Microsoft. All of these companies are really looking for guarantees from the Indian government on how they can get past the red tape to do the kinds of investments they would like to do. And they will also likely be able to partner around incentives that are being offered by the U.S. government, particularly around the areas of green energy. And there is a long-standing friction between these two countries, between the U.S. and India, when it comes to trade. We're really seeing a lot of those barriers on both sides come down. We had this announcement earlier from the Indian side that they have withdrawn additional customs just levied on the U.S. government that were reciprocal for the U.S. tariffs on steel. I think there is an appetite in the U.S. government, and they're getting a lot of pressure from business leaders to lower their own sets of boundaries. And those are primarily around the issues of export controls and some of the permits that U.S. companies need in order to export certain kinds of technology around the world. So I think you'll see that be the next step that these CEOs ask for in the relationship.
Jessica Stone, stay with us. We're now talking to Mr. Outzen. He's a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council in Turkey and also a geopolitical analyst. Mr. Outzen, welcome to the program. Looking at this meetings between the Indian Prime Minister and the President of the United States, he met various CEOs. He also met CEOs of top American companies, which include FedEx, MasterCard, and we also had Adobe. What does it say about the Indian Prime Minister's motive to improve technology in India vis-a-vis America?
Well, it's good to be with you. And I think the motive on both sides is practical. There's a really unique, globally, in global terms, unique complementarity between these two economies. On the one hand, we have a highly developed, high technology economy in the United States that is short on high-tech workers, needs to import high-tech workers, and also has relatively high wages. But we see in the case of India, large manpower pool and also a very large educated manpower pool, but not a lot of corporate giants with the high technology base that you find in the U.S. So the complementarity there is clear. I think that Prime Minister Modi's trip was motivated to help Indian industry and economy, but it's a win-win situation, clearly. Mm-hmm. The thing that strikes me about this is most interesting is that this is not a quick or a new decision. The U.S. has made a decision 20 years ago under President Bush that the days of sort of sanctioning India and trying to tell India what to do and not treating India more or less as an equal and a complementary partner was not yielding the necessary results. It's been a long time to get to this point, but it's good to see two national leaders really seizing that moment to broaden and widen that complementary opportunity.
Mr. Outzen, stay with us. Jessica Stone, coming back to you, the Prime Minister has started a new chapter in the country's strategic partnership at the White House. He also says that he's seeking to position India, the world's most populous country at 1.4 billion people in its fifth largest economy, as a manufacturing and diplomatic powerhouse. Probably you can tell us more about that.
Well, I think that has been very clearly his message throughout the visit. I mean, he has drawn a clear link between the ways in which India and the U.S. can partner and basically said, look, we know that you have a goal to improve stability and security across the Indo-Pacific. We can help you with that. We know that you have a goal to increase stability in the global supply chain. We can help you with that. We have goals to modernize our military. You can help us with that. And by the way, we're going to make sure that we lower some of our inhibitions to purchasing your weapons over Russian weapons. So I think you're really seeing Prime Minister Modi come to the table with a lot of ways that he can meet the needs of the United States. And U.S. business is beyond the moon. I mean, this has been a tough time for them to be in business, whether it's the pandemic, the supply chain crunches around the way that China handled the COVID epidemic. They have had their work cut out for them to deliver. You think of a company like FedEx. They're not a technology company in the way that Adobe is. They had to move product in the middle of a pandemic. So for sure he wants to meet with the Indian Prime Minister to make sure that they can have hubs throughout India and they can move things in and out of India, but also through India to other parts of the world. So Prime Minister Modi is in a unique position to position his country as the answer to a lot of the things that the U.S. is looking to move, and primarily looking to move past the relationship that it's had with China as the major manufacturer around the world. Now, is this going to happen quickly? No, it's going to be a 10 to 15 year horizon, many analysts tell me. Certainly there are a lot more infrastructure needs that India has in order to be able to meet the needs, whether it's ports, whether it's delivery systems. But the fact that the Indian Prime Minister has set that goal, the Made in India goal included, means that the government will probably move in that direction, and we'll see the U.S. have an opportunity to invest in that infrastructure development. In fact, there were several prominent infrastructure CEOs at the dinner last night, along alongside some of those technology companies. So you can see that this diplomacy, strategic and economic tracks, these are tracks that are operating on all four cylinders, if you will, between the two countries.
Right. Our correspondent at the White House, Jessica Stone, thank you very much for talking to us. Mr. Outzen, coming back to you and talking about China, Washington wants New Delhi to be a strategic counterweight to China, and deals announced this week included several investments from U.S. firms aimed at spurring semiconductor manufacturing in India and lowering its dependence on China for electronics. What would you say about India's move to counter China when it comes to development, manufacturing, and also technology?
Well, we live in a multipolar world, and India is not the first, but is one of the most important countries to come to the conclusion that you can't be dependent on a single source technology or military equipment supplier. And frankly, through most of the Cold War and the post-Cold War period, India was not a producer of most of its own equipment, but imported a lot of it from the Soviet Union and then later the Russian Federation. So I think the desire to make sure that it's not dependent just on Russian technology, which is not always a top quality product, and going forward, not always going to be a secure proposition given the proximity and the increasing closeness of the alliance between China and Russia. It's a wise thing strategically for India to diversify. So first of all, you get some top-level American technology and Western technology, such as the GE 414 engines that have been approved for sale and the Predator drones and so forth that are cutting-edge technologies. But you also get co-production. So you get Indian factories and engineers working with American counterparts on the same weapons projects and military support system projects. So the industrial base of India becomes more self-sufficient in this way as well. As an expanding power, as the world's most populous nation, as an important anchor geopolitically in the Indo-Pacific region, India needs these capabilities. So I think this is a place where the U.S. has a lead, and it's in both countries' interests for India to come along further. In this multipolar era, the United States cannot really balance against Chinese ambitions in this region alone. It needs strong partners. Japan is a great partner, has its own industrial base and technology base, but has some other limitations. India doesn't have some of those same limitations. It's a larger country, larger population, broader geographic sphere, but it does have more limitations technologically. So in terms of balancing against China geopolitically and strategically in this region, it's win-win for the two countries to move forward on these technologies.
Well, I've been talking to Rich Outzen. He is a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council in Turkey and also a geopolitical analyst. Rich, thank you very much for your inputs and for talking to WION World is One today. It is the final leg of the Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit of the United States. He has already met the Vice President Kamala Harris and also the U.S. Secretary of State for a lunch. And what remains right now is that the Prime Minister Narendra Modi will have a one-to-one meeting with CEOs at the Kennedy Center. He will address the Indian diaspora at the Ronald Reagan Center, which includes doctors, hoteliers, lawyers, and businessmen. This is in efforts to enhance business and trade. The Prime Minister will make his first trip or visit to Egypt in Africa to meet President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi. The African nation is in the midst of a currency crunch and financial crisis, and there are reports that India is weighing barter trade with Egypt in form of credit lines and also goods like fertilizer and gas. So we are keeping our eyes on the Prime Minister's last leg of his U.S. visit, where, like I said, he will have a one-to-one meeting with CEOs at the Kennedy Center. He will address the Indian diaspora at the Ronald Reagan Center, which includes doctors, hoteliers, lawyers, and businessmen.
The Prime Minister